Writers of video games and horror films often create terrifying locations within their worlds. Only afterward are similar locations stumbled upon in real life. Something similar happened with the Umbrella Corporation from Resident Evil. Their six-pointed star already very much resembled the abandoned Hovrinskaya Hospital in North Moscow. Its construction began 16 years before the first game in the Resident Evil series, and the legends surrounding the building are no less frightening than the adventures of Mila Jovovich. On today's episode of Simple Infographic, we'll find out why Hovrinskaya Hospital is remarkable and whether or not all the terrifying legends told about it are true. As is typical for objects of mystery, Hovrinskaya Hospital was built over an old cemetery. The cemetery had been located near the church of the icon of the Mother of God of the Sign. That same church remains standing 600 meters from the abandoned hospital, but the cemetery was leveled in 1960. At least, that's what the legend says. In truth, there was never any cemetery there, although that spot was swampy and always considered unfit for construction. And the idea to build a hospital over a swamp seems even more strange than building it over a cemetery. In 1980, a decision was made to begin construction on a new hospital complex. The medical institution was planned to be able to accommodate 1,300 patients at once. It was even planned to allow for patients to arrive by air, since the hospital's roof would also function as a helipad. But then came the difficult year of 1985. In the history of the Soviet Union, this period was known as perestroika, and it was accompanied by large-scale political and economic changes. Consequently, there was neither the time nor the financial means for the construction of the huge edifice. Moreover, there's a theory that the hospital could have collapsed due to its unreliable foundation, and that construction needed to be stopped for this reason. Since that time, the 11-story building has stood empty and attracted urban explorers and adventure seekers into its depths, and this has given rise to many fearsome legends. Local residents say that a satanic cult named Nimastor has taken up residence in the hospital's basement for many years. According to legend, the cult was established in 1984 before construction had ceased. It started as a small group of 10 people who chose Bitsa Park for their rituals. Painted symbols from the cult can still be found in the park. In 1986, they moved to the still new, unfinished building, choosing to occupy the basement where they began performing ritual sacrifices of animals. But soon they moved over to people. The Satanists would lure the victims into the empty building, bring them to the basement, and they would never be seen again. Members of the cult would rape their victims, kill them, subject their bodies to a ritualistic mass, and even eat them. There's a theory that the members of Nimastor would roast people alive before eating them. Over time, the Satanist numbers grew to 50 people, and the number of their victims to several thousand. Some internet users argue that the local police department still has files on 1,500 missing citizens. By that time, they had already attracted the attention of law enforcement agencies. Additionally, within the cult, there arose a power struggle, and one Nimastor participant had possibly turned over his associates. A special-purpose police unit organized a roundup of Satanists. And here, the theories and versions of the story branch out. Some hypothesize that all the members of the cult were executed and left to rot in the basement. Another version claims that OMON, the Russian Special Purpose Mobile Unit, was more precautionary and carefully covered their tracks. The troops threw several grenades into the basement. The concrete ceilings caved in due to an explosion, and a stream of groundwater rushed in since. It mustn't be forgotten, the hospital's foundation stood on a swamp. Additionally, the Likaborka River runs directly under the hospital. It runs through a pipeline, but it was apparently damaged by explosions from grenades thrown by OMON. As a result, some of the Satanists were killed by the explosions, and the rest were either buried under concrete blocks or drowned. Thus, the basement was flooded. It's unlikely that anyone would want to risk clearing it out and discovering it all to be true. This is the theory that came about in the mid-90s, and since then, the Satanists are believed to have left the abandoned hospital. However, even without them, the ominous building has had its fair share of strange incidents. Perhaps the most horrifying discovery took place about 30 years after construction had stopped. It was the half-decomposed body of a dog. But what grabbed people's attention was the fact that its legs were tied together. Local residents believed that the dog had been lying in the building since the beginning of the 1980s. It's possible that the dog belonged to a woman who lived near the strange hospital. The dog had run away from its elderly owner during a walk. The woman hoped that her pet would find its way back home. But after a few days, she had set off on her own to search for the lost dog. And where else to look than the place that was shrouded in fearsome legends? The woman made her way around the Hovrinskaya Hospital property and discovered the body of her beloved, the poor thing's legs bound. The woman wanted to punish whoever had so cruelly killed an innocent animal, so she turned to the police. They turned the woman away, and she began the search for the criminal on her own. As a result, the dead dog's owner became a victim herself. She fell in a hole and broke both legs. Nobody responded to her calls for help, as there was not a soul in the area, and if someone was there, it's doubtful they would risk going inside. In the end, the woman died, and her lifeless body was found only after several days. However, there's also a more prosaic version of the story. The dog was tied up by security guards after it was already dead. They tied ropes on its feet and brought it to a conspicuous place in order to scare off teenagers. Sadly, human bodies are found there considerably more often than animal remains. Visitors to Hovrinskaya even set up a memorial to one of them on the second floor of the structure. Many believe that every visitor to the abandoned hospital must pay their respects to the monument of Alexei Kryushkin. At the age of 16, the teenager threw himself down an elevator shaft from the 8th floor, all due to an unrequited love. Ever since, visitors to Hovrinskaya Hospital occasionally leave gifts at the memorial. Some leave flowers, some leave cigarettes, and others adorn the monument to his suicide with graffiti and poetry. Kryushkin is the only confirmed case of suicide on the grounds of the abandoned building. Others were victim of either unfortunate accidents or murders. In 1990, the body of a murdered girl was found there. That crime is not connected to the Nemastor cult, although it happened around that time. The Satanists usually got rid of their bodies. After the rituals, there'd be little left of the corpses. Additionally, urban legend has it that they arranged some kind of crematorium, where they burned their victims. In December of 2015, a security guard discovered a hanged man in the building. His bound hands indicated that this could barely be a suicide, and it was certainly no accident. Some conspiracy theorists believe that Hovrinskaya's biggest secret is hidden underground. There's a conspiracy theory that Hovrinskaya Hospital has several secret floors underground. The unfinished quarters serve only as a cover for a secret laboratory located on the underground floors. Those who believe this theory support their argument with the fact that Hovrinskaya Hospital has a hot water connection. What exactly is carried out in this laboratory, urban legend does not say. Evidently, that's why it's a secret. Nobody knows about its activities. The only thing online users mention is a secret morgue. However, to what end would it be necessary to store dead bodies underneath a giant concrete box is yet to be understood. Perhaps it's to guard the body of the Satanists, so that they don't rise from the dead, or rather, from the drowned. Among all the dark stories from Hovrinskaya, there is surprisingly one bright one. According to urban legend, a friendly spirit by the name of Raf inhabits Hovrinskaya Hospital. He acts as keeper of the abandoned building. Raf helps people who have become lost to find the exit and also rescues trapped people, such as those whose leg is stuck between concrete blocks or have fallen into an elevator shaft or other opening. By the way, those kinds of accidents are a common occurrence there. Throughout the history of its existence, Hovrinskaya Hospital has attracted urban explorers and all kinds of thrill seekers to its walls. All visits can easily end with a small scrape or with a serious injury. For example, since 2011, 12 teens have suffered serious injuries here, and 13 have died after falling down elevator shafts. This isn't surprising for an abandoned, unfinished project on 100,000 square meters of land. These factors in combination contributed to the birth of horror stories. In these stories, the numbers of deaths increased, and their causes were accounted for by mystical forces. Given that this place wasn't always protected, the murders and legends become better understood. The building was only guarded from the moment construction stopped until 1990, and the first official corpse was found as early as the first year after this protection ended. For almost 20 years, Hovrinskaya Hospital was not protected at all. The huge unguarded territory naturally turned into a magnet for murderers, drug dealers, drug addicts, cultists, homeless people, and simply those looking for adventure. Not until 2009 was barbed wire put up surrounding the area, although regular security didn't appear until 2011. But given the size of the hospital complex, security couldn't possibly fully restrict access to the building. People continued to make pilgrimages to the site, noted as being one of the scariest places on the planet. Thus, in 2012, construction of the hospital was officially called off. Until that moment, it was considered frozen, and several people held on to hope for the future of the unfinished institution. Then, on November 21st, 2018, the building was turned into a pile of construction garbage. This task required 50 people and 26 pieces of equipment. Even the basement was destroyed, the legendary residence of the Satanists. In March of 2019, all that was left of the fearsome construction was an open field, and so no one will ever know the truth about the Nemastor cult and other horrors. If it hadn't been demolished, the building likely would have collapsed on its own. It had already begun to sink into the swamp during the construction phase, and 1 year before it was brought down, the hospital had sunk 12 meters below the water. At the time of this episode's creation, construction of a new residential complex is underway on the hospital grounds. Was this a good decision? Nemastor Satanists are unlikely to conduct their rituals in a densely populated high-rise building, but the problems with the bog certainly won't go anywhere. If the hospital was unable to support its own weight and began to sink underwater, then what can be expected of even more massive residential skyscrapers? Nevertheless, there's a chance that some of you will like this video from your home, built over the site of the legendary umbrella, a name given to the mysterious Hovrinskaya Hospital. Another nickname was Wonderland. One inscription on the walls of Hovrinskaya said, "This Wonderland is a place of fear. You come in here and disappear." Although now the hospital itself has disappeared. What do you think? How much of the urban legend about Hovrinskaya Hospital is actually true? Would you risk moving into the residential complex, built on the ruins of that horrifying building? Write about this in the comments. Like and subscribe to Simple Infographic to be in the loop of the most interesting stories.